10 unsolved mysteries that took place at gas stations. It's the ultimate horror film scenario, running out of gas at night while driving in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully, there are gas stations everywhere these days, with many open 24 hours. So the odds of that scenario happening in real life are quite low. But service stations can still be ominous places where bad things happen.
1. The disappearance of Kelly Dove. It's been nearly 35 years since a Harrisonburg woman went missing from a local gas station she was working at on South Main Street. Kelly Berg Dove was just 20 years old when her family says she was abducted. I often wonder what kind of torture she went through, but those are probably my worst moments, said Rachel Berg, fighting back tears. Monday is the anniversary of her disappearance. Her mother, Rachel Berg, traveled from North Carolina to take a DNA test so that in the event her daughter's body is found, investigators will be able to make a perfect match. Kelly worked third shift at Imperial Gas Station. It has since been torn down for construction of a new roadway. At that time I felt someone had come in to rob the store and had come in, and maybe taken her and was going to dump her out someplace, said Rachel Berg. There's never any answers, so after the years go by you try not to dwell on it, said Elaine Berg, Kelly's sister. Rachel says Kelly called 911 3 times from a payphone located inside the store. Rachel says her daughter had to come from around the counter to get to the phone near the front of the store. The first call came in after midnight when Kelly told police she was receiving obscene phone calls. She then asked if police could come keep her safe. A short time later, Kelly called police again, this time saying a man came into the store and was quote dressed improperly. Rachel says her daughter could have meant that the man may have exposed himself. The third call, Rachel says Kelly sounded frightened on the 911 recording. She said, "Will you please hurry, he's driving up in the parking lot in a silver Ford," said Rachel Berg. That was the only clue in her daughter's disappearance. Kelly's family wonders why it took 3 911 calls before an officer was dispatched. The family also says the night Kelly went missing, officers didn't close the store or test for any fingerprints inside the store. There's somebody that knows something. There's got to be someone out there that knows something and they're just afraid to come forward, said Elaine Berg. The Bergs say anyone can make an anonymous call to police if they have any information in Kelly's disappearance. Rachel says after nearly 30 years of not knowing, she's accepted the fact that Kelly could be dead. "I guess it's a mother's intuition, a mother's feeling. She was dead, and it's an awful feeling to have as a mother," said Rachel Berg. Kelly also has a daughter, who was only 4 years old when she disappeared. Rachel Berg will be 72 years old in July, and says she's still hoping for closure, hoping investigators find a body, and hoping you can provide police with any tips that may lead to an arrest. The family is also hoping that when the road construction is complete, a memorial sign can be placed somewhere along the road. They say it's a way to help keep her memory alive.
2. The disappearance of Susan Swedel. Susan Sue Ann Swedel was 19 years old when she disappeared without a trace from Lake Elmo, Minnesota in 1988. Susan had graduated high school and spent a semester away at college before deciding she wasn't ready to leave her family. She returned home and began working at Kmart in Oak Park Heights, Minnesota. On January 19, 1988, Susan's sister called the store at about 4 p.m. asking what Susan's plans were that evening because the weather was near blizzard conditions. Susan informed her sister she intended to come straight home and watch movies and eat popcorn with her sister and her mother to avoid the weather outside. Susan's mother later called the store again to tell her daughter to be sure to take main, busy roads to get home in case something happened, and she slid off the road so it would be easier for her to get help. Susan's manager noted it was odd that Susan changed out of her red pantsuit and into a mini skirt before leaving the store, considering the freezing temperatures outside. On her way home, Susan's car overheated, so she pulled into a gas station, only about a mile from the apartment she shared with her mother and sister. The attendant at the gas station informed La that Susan had asked if it was okay to park her car there. The attendant informed her it would be fine, as long as she parked it at the edge of the parking lot so it wouldn't be in the way of snowplows. After Susan parked her car, the attendant said she began chatting with a man who was at the gas pumps. The man was described as well-built with shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a leather jacket. Susan got into this man's car and was never seen again. When Susan didn't return home, her mother called police inquiring about any accidents in the area due to the weather. A local patrolman went searching and located Susan's car parked at the gas station. When police investigated her car, they found her driver's license inside and discovered that the petcock on the radiator had been loosened and there was no water inside, which explains why the car overheated. Police believe the car was deliberately tampered with and that someone may have followed her, waiting for the car to break down. Oddly, a few days later, Susan's sister returned home to the apartment and found the red pantsuit she had been wearing before she changed at work crumpled under the bed. She also found dishes in the sink and could smell fresh cigarette smoke. However, there was no other sign of Susan. I can't find anything that says if Susan herself was or was not a smoker. This led her to believe she had left of her own accord. However, now foul play is suspected in her case. Loved ones informed police that Susan had been receiving phone calls at work from a man named Dale, though no one had met him or knew anything about him. In 2006, her family had a glimmer of hope when it was found that there was activity on Susan's social security number. However, it was found out someone stole Susan's identity. Susan was active in the Christ Lutheran Church and had a second job outside of her Kmart position at the time of her disappearance.
3. The disappearance of Tanjna Hussain. Tanjna was last seen at a Marathon gas station in the 20,500 block of Greenfield Road in Detroit, Michigan on October 2, 2008. Her mother's live-in boyfriend, Jamral Hussain, stopped there to get gas and buy some gum and juice. He left Tanjna in his red four-door 1997 George Prism and went into the store at 9:02 p.m. He came out at 9:06 p.m. and Tanjna was gone. He says his car was locked at the time of her disappearance. Jamral didn't call the police or search for that child at that time. Instead, he drove to pick up Tanjna's mother, Nilüfer Begum, from her job at a clothing store in the nearby Northland Mall. Begum asked him where her daughter was, and Jamral replied he would take her to where Tanjna was. The couple returned to the gas station and asked employees there if there were surveillance cameras in the area where Jamral's car had been parked. There were no cameras on that side of the building, although surveillance cameras do show Jamral making his purchases in the store. Jamral and Begum filed a missing child report with police at 9:30 p.m. Photographs of both of them are posted below this case summary. Although they share the same surname, Tanjna and Jamral aren't related. Jamral and Begum are immigrants from Bangladesh. They'd been dating about 5 months by the time Tanjna disappeared. Jamral's attorney maintains his client knows little about American culture and the American legal system, although he does speak reasonably good English. Police admitted that language and cultural barriers have impeded their investigation. Tanjna's father, Muhammad Ahmed, lives in New York. Ahmed and Begum were married for 5 years before their divorce in 2006. Their other 2 children live with Ahmed's parents in Bangladesh. After Tanjna's disappearance was publicized, a 15-year-old girl went to police and said she recognized Jamral from a television broadcast, and that he had kidnapped her at gunpoint, held her captive for a week, and raped her repeatedly in February 2008. She said she hadn't reported the crime before because Jamral had threatened to kill her and her family. Instead, she claimed she had run away with her boyfriend. Investigators arrested Jamral for kidnapping and rape, and also charged the couple who lived in the house where the girl said she'd been imprisoned. The charges against them were later dismissed, and the charges against Jamal were reduced to criminal sexual conduct after 2 witnesses testified that he and the girl had been dating each other. In December 2009, Jamral was convicted of statutory rape. He was sentenced to 1.5 to 15 years in prison. Begum initially supported Jamral, saying he loved Tanjna and cared for her like a daughter. By November 2008, however, she publicly stated she doubted Jamral's version of events and believed he knew more about Tanjna's disappearance than he was telling. Begum took a polygraph of her own initiative and passed the test. Jamral took a polygraph as well, but he was so upset at the time that the results were useless. He refused to take the test again. Begum has since returned to Bangladesh, where her other children live. She says she believes Stenchna is still alive. Although some investigators stated they have serious doubts about Jamral's story, he hasn't been named a suspect in Tenchna's disappearance. Her case is investigated as a missing child rather than as a crime. Little evidence is available as to her fate.
4. The murder of Leo Lamontagne. Leo Lamontagne was working his second overnight shift at the hub service station in Saint Boniface on September 11, 1957 when someone clubbed the 19-year-old over the head, and left him lying in a pool of blood. Lamontagne managed to cling to life for almost 4 days, before he succumbed to the vicious beating. "It's heartbreaking to see our son turn out to be such a good boy and then be killed by a robber," said Amy Lamontagne, the victim's father. "If all young boys were like Leo, this wouldn't have happened." The victim left the family farm near Gordon, about 20 kilometers northwest of Winnipeg, to find work in the city. He landed a job with D. Ackland Auto Repair on Higgins Avenue and also took a part-time job at the hub service station to earn extra money. He was saving his money. He took the shift to give a fellow employee a day off, said the elder Lamontagne. He was no rock and roll troublemaker. This was in the early days of Elvis when many parents looked at rock music as the devil's work. Lamontagne was a devout Roman Catholic who attended Mass, and took communion at nearby Precious Blood before he went to work, said Pastor Lemoyne. Lamontagne had been an altar boy and school patrol member at St. Mary's Cathedral and School. The teen's death so touched and enraged residents of Greater Winnipeg, that all 14 police departments went on alert in the hope of catching the killer. This was 17 years before amalgamation took place. Winnipeg Chief Robert Taft immediately sent his best investigators to help the beleaguered smaller force in Saint Boniface. Because of the brutality, police believed the robbery was committed by a nervous first-timer. The slugging appeared to be the work of an amateur, said Saint Boniface Chief, J. H. Baudry. An experienced robber would not slug so hard or so often and would not try to intimidate his victim. Lamontagne was slugged at least 4 times over the head, with the rusty handle from a hydraulic jack as he worked at the rear of the station on the southeast corner of Tash Street and Provencher Boulevard. The killer fled with $128 in cash and credit card receipts but missed a considerable amount of money in a safe, said garage owner Gerard Prive. Lamontagne was found at 4:10 a.m., slumped in a chair in the office, his upper body across a desk near the phone. He dragged himself 8 meters from where the attack occurred near the grease pit but was too weak to make the phone call for help. The marks along the hall to the office were covered with clawed finger marks of blood, said Prive. The only thing I can see keeping the young man alive is the grim determination he displayed following the attack, said Chief Baudry. 2 days after the attack, the owner said the sound of an air compressor may have covered any noise made as the attacker approached Lamontagne, who was most likely leaning over to clean the grease pit. At the rear of the garage, near a car wash pit, police found 52 cents the killer may have dropped. At least 7 customers are known to have visited the station between midnight, when Lamontagne started his shift, and when he was attacked. He was last seen at 1:50 a.m. by a worker from a nearby restaurant who parked his car on the service station lot. The witness told police he saw the teen washing the garage floor. 2 St. Boniface cops drove through the lot at 2:20 a.m. They didn't see the victim but noticed the windows were steamed. Other people passed through the lot but they were customers who, rather than seeking an attendant when none appeared, simply helped themselves to gas worth $16.69. Many people, Prive said, would take gas because the attendant was sleeping, but usually they returned to pay the next day. Had Lamontagne been found earlier, he may have survived his injuries, since St. Boniface Hospital was only a kilometer away. The only concrete lead police had was the description of a man, supplied by 2 young men who attempted to purchase gasoline about 2:30 a.m. The men told police they'd been turned away by a disheveled man in khaki shirt and pants. The men quoted the stranger as saying, "Sorry, we're closed. We're washing cars inside." The man was described as being in his 30s, about 5'8", with a stocky build and brown hair. The witnesses said they'd pulled up to the pumps and waited for a few minutes. As the driver opened his door to get out, A man suddenly entered the office from the garage area. The man walked outside, refused service, turned around and returned inside the service station. Police believe the man was LaMontagne's killer. Prive said no man matching the description had ever worked for him. Hopes of a quick arrest were buoyed with the discovery of khaki clothing. The owner of the grease-stained clothing was a known criminal, but had an ironclad alibi. He was in jail when the attack occurred. No one has ever been charged with the death of Leo LaMontagne, and since so much time has elapsed, the case will most likely remain unsolved.
5. The disappearance of Cheryl Shearer. Shearer was last seen working her shift at Rhodes Pump, her own station self-service gasoline station in Scott City, Missouri on April 17, 1979. She disappeared from the station sometime between 11:40 and 11:50 a.m. Shearer's purse and checkbook were at her workplace upon investigation later in the day, and her car was parked in the parking lot with the car keys inside. Approximately $480 was missing from the station's cash register. Authorities believe that Shearer was abducted by persons unknown after a robbery. There were no witnesses to her apparent kidnapping. Serial killers Otis Toole and Henry Leo Lucas, who traveled together and separately across the United States in the 1970s and 1980s, randomly killing people, told police that they kidnapped and killed a girl in the area around the time Shearer disappeared. Lucas was shown a photograph of Shearer and says she was not the girl he abducted, but police suspect she was because she was the only girl reported missing in the area at that time. There was never enough evidence to charge Lucas and Toole in connection with Shearer's case, though it was established that they were indeed in Scott City when she disappeared, along with Toole's niece and nephew. Both men have since died in prison. It should be noted that they each had a history of making confessions to crimes they did not commit. Lucas is also considered a possible suspect in the disappearances of Eva DeBrell and Elizabeth Teresa Bishop. Both he and Toole have since died in prison. It should be noted that they each had a history of making confessions to crimes they did not commit. 32 years after her 19-year-old daughter disappeared, a Scott County mother says she's finally found hope she'll get the closure she's looking for. Cheryl Ann Shearer's mother and sister now say watching families who've also searched for decades make progress now gives them the courage to put out a call to anyone who might know who took Cheryl Ann more than 3 decades ago. "It was a beautiful day," recalled Libby Shearer. "Then I got the telephone call and it turned our lives upside down." Libby says the last time she saw her oldest daughter, Cheryl Ann, was on her way to work at a Scott City gas station. She also remembers the last time they spoke. Libby says Cheryl Ann called her just before she was apparently abducted. Not long after that, Libby got another call. This time it was from authorities telling her Cheryl Ann was missing. "I just broke down and cried," said Libby. Authorities believe sometime before noon, Cheryl Ann was kidnapped. Her purse and checkbook were left at the gas station. Her car was in the lot with the keys inside. Money was missing from the gas station register. "I have no idea who would want to take her, would want to hurt her," said Libby. "She was such a good girl." It happened yards from the busiest street in Scott City, and yet there were no witnesses. Another element, a normally busy grocery store right next to the gas station, happened to be closed that day. You go back and forth with like closed. Was it somebody local that knew? Wondered Cheryl Ann's younger sister, Diane. And then it could have been somebody off the interstate. Diane was just 14. She remembers Cheryl's boyfriend and her friends went searching back roads, and at that time networked with truckers on the interstate to relay information about the search. Those were clearly much different methods than technology allows today. "I always think if it had been a different time would she have been found," said Diane. "When I see somebody now finding people 20 or 30 years later, I definitely have hope. Now they focus on the happy times," remembers a happy blue-eyed redhead and a little girl who loved drawing and animals. Cheryl Ann was prom queen and had lots of friends. Now, the Shearers say they want the mystery solved. "Truthfully, I don't want to know all the details. I would just like to know what happened, then we can lay her to rest," said Diane. Her mother Libby has this to say: "I still think there's somebody out there. If they would just come forward, you don't know how much it would help this family. It would be such a blessing." Cheryl's father Raymond passed away 6 years ago without ever learning what happened to his oldest daughter. Now the family wants to thank the people who stood beside them then, and now, along with the Scott County Sheriff's Department, who continues to work the case. Sheriff Rick Walter says they get several leads every year and they work to investigate everyone.
6. The disappearance of Kelly Cox. The memories Alexis Bynum has of her mother come from photographs and stories told by relatives. Those memories are particularly painful on this day. Alexis was 19 months old when her mother, Kelly Cox, disappeared on July 15, 1997. Since then, neither Alexis, Cox's parents, nor any of her friends have heard from Cox, who was a 20-year-old honor student at the University of North Texas. "I believe she was abducted," Alexis said during a recent interview. "I don't know if she's alive or not." Though Cox has been legally declared presumed dead, Alexis and other relatives hang on to slivers of hope. "I have always believed that she would walk through the front door one day," said Alexis, now 15 and a sophomore at R.L. Turner High School. Cox's mother, Jan Bynum, said not knowing is the worst part. "Hope can be good on some days, and hope can be painful," Bynum said. That July morning was like any other in the Bynums' home. Before she left for work, Jan Bynum stopped by her daughter's room and said, "Have a good day. I love you. I'll talk to you this afternoon." Cox drove from their Farmers Branch house to the Denton Municipal Complex in her beige 1989 Nissan 240 SX to meet up with her criminology class for a tour of the Denton jail. The brown-haired, blue-eyed senior followed her professor's instructions not to carry personal items into the jail, locking them up in her car and hiding a spare car key in a magnetic box under a fender. When the tour was over, Cox discovered that her spare key didn't work and called her boyfriend, Lawrence Harris, to bring her another key. She had to make the call from a Conoco gasoline station, because she wasn't allowed to make a long-distance phone call from the police station. After calling, Cox bought a soft drink and headed back to her car about noon. But when her boyfriend arrived, she was gone. Only her car was there. Though hundreds of leads poured into authorities in the weeks after her disappearance, no one has been arrested in a mystery that has stumped Denton police, the FBI and the Texas Rangers. "We used every resource available at that time," said Denton County Sheriff Benny Parkey, who was the lead investigator on the case as a Denton detective. "As a police officer, you're hired to protect and serve, but once in a while you run across a case like this that just frustrates you." The theory that Cox left on her own accord was quickly shot down by authorities because it was clear that she loved her toddler daughter and was close to her parents. What's more, she had left all her personal belongings at her family's home in Farmers Branch, including $200. Also untouched was her bank account, which had about $1,000 in July 1997. The conclusion: Cox was abducted. Police established that she made the call to her boyfriend at 11:47 a.m., and he immediately left Farmers Branch for the 30-minute drive to Denton. Harris, who had dated Cox for 9 months, would later pass 4 polygraph tests to eliminate him as a suspect. Authorities noted that Cox had a rose and the name Francisco tattooed on her right palm and a tattoo of a scorpion on her right shoulder. Francisco was a former boyfriend, Francisco Almaguer, the father of her child. He was in Dallas getting married when the disappearance occurred, and was also eliminated as a suspect early in the investigation. Other people of interest have surfaced from time to time, but leads had dwindled as the years wore on. Immediately after Cox disappeared, Jan and Niles Bynum took care of their granddaughter and in 2004 adopted her. Alexis calls them Mom and Dad. Jan Bynum is Vice President of Human Resources at Volunteers of America Texas and ULIS, and Niles Bynum, Cox's stepfather, is a retired jet engine inspector. Jan Bynum says that a day doesn't go by that she doesn't shed a tear for her missing daughter. "With a tragedy like this, I had 2 choices. I could have dug a hole and crawled in it," she said. "Or, I could move on for Alexis' sake, and that's what I did." One of the most difficult days occurred in 2007, when Bynum went to a Denton County court to have her daughter legally declared as presumed dead, so Alexis could become the beneficiary and receive benefits from Cox's father, and Bynum's ex-husband, who had died. Every missing person story she hears stirs up the memories of her daughter's case. The Elizabeth Smart and J.C. Dugard cases have brought back painful memories for Jan Bynum. Dugard was abducted in 1991 and found alive 18 years later. At age 14, Smart was taken at knife point in June 2002 from her Salt Lake City home, and found alive in March 2003. And several reports of missing children in North Texas have prompted Bynum to volunteer her time to help those parents. "I know what they are going through," Bynum said. "So I decided that if this could bring some good, I would help them." In March 2010, Denton detective Eric Beckwith volunteered to take over the cold case, because the previous detective had retired. For weeks, Beckwith combed through mounds of paperwork on the Cox case and re-interviewed dozens of her relatives, friends and acquaintances. He researched the sex offenders and the violent criminals who were in the area that day. "It was never a closed case, just inactive," Beckwith said. But the Denton detective hasn't turned up anything new in the months that he has reviewed the case. A $25,000 reward remains for information leading to Cox's safe return. "Somebody knows something about this case," Beckwith said. "Her family needs answers."
7. The disappearance of Annie Jo Lepley. Lepley was last seen at the Texaco station at Interstate 25 and Colorado 165 in Colorado City, Colorado on May 30, 1976. He had worked there part-time for 2 years. Lepley picked up the keys from the manager and began his shift at 6:15 a.m. Only about 15 minutes later, customers wanting to buy gas discovered the station was unattended. A short time after that, Lepley's manager and the police found Lepley's 1967 pickup truck in the station parking lot with the keys in the ignition. Inside the station, the manager's Citizen Band (CB) radio had its microphone ripped out and the cash register, which had contained between $50 and $100, was empty. Lepley has never been heard from again. Authorities stated a middle-aged Caucasian male, with graying sandy-colored hair and blue eyes, about 5'11" tall and 175 pounds, was seen at the Texaco station between 6:30 and 7:30 the morning Lepley disappeared. The person drove a flashy two-door late model car, possibly a Pontiac Grand Prix, colored silver or white with maroon trim and a maroon landau top. He was pulling an unusual 4 or 5 foot long, tarp-covered plywood trailer that may have been handmade. He may have been en route to Wyoming at the time. This individual is the prime suspect in Lepley's disappearance. He has never been identified. His mother Betty Lepley said he was a happy-go-lucky boy, who loved to be in the middle of action. Joe enrolled in a motorcycle mechanics course at the area vocational center in Pueblo, and loved to pop a wheelie. He had made the state finals in Cannon City as a pole vaulter, was a starter on the Rye High School basketball team and played football. He was an honor student at school. His father Bob Lepley was a plumber in the small foothills community of Rye. That Sunday afternoon, Joe was going to ride his motorcycle with his brother Jim after he got off of work at noon. In 3 days Joe was to graduate from Rye High School where he had been a multi-sport athlete and scholar. In a little more than a month he would have joined in the nation's bicentennial festivities. Joe was planning to work as a plumbing apprentice for his father that summer. Then he wanted to enlist in the U.S. Air Force and go to Adams State College in nearby Alamosa. Joe never got to ride his motorcycle that afternoon. He didn't receive his high school diploma on June 2, 1976, nor did he work with his dad that summer, watch fireworks on the nation's 200th birthday or go to college. That Sunday morning he drove to the Crow Junction Texaco gas station 20 miles south of Pueblo just off of Interstate 25 in his 1967 pickup truck. He parked and left the keys in the ignition. Joe opened the station at 6:30 a.m. He took a newspaper through a corridor to a restaurant adjoining the gas station and joked with a waitress. He was last seen wearing a green Texaco shirt, blue jeans and hiking shoes under a gas station canopy near the gas pumps at 6:45 a.m. Witnesses at the restaurant also saw a middle-aged man at the gas station at the time. A witness saw the unidentified stranger driving off at 7 a.m. By then Joe was nowhere in sight. Customers who went to the gas station called the Pueblo County Sheriff's Department. Deputies discovered that a microphone to the gas station's Citizen Band radio had been ripped out of the radio. Someone had broken into a cash box that had held about $100. Lepley's mother believes he was abducted after he surprised someone burgling the gas station. Although he disappeared during the daylight hours in a high-traffic area on Memorial Day weekend, no one saw or heard anything suspicious. His case remains unsolved.
8. The disappearance of Amy Sue Pagnac. Susan Pagnac Sr. sat in a friend's Brooklyn Center garage most of Monday, fielding questions from reporters about Amy Sue Pagnac, her daughter missing for 25 years. The 13-year-old girl had disappeared, abducted, her parents believe, from a gas station near her home in August 1989. The investigation by Maple Grove police had gone cold, the mother said, until Sunday when authorities showed up at her home and told her to pack a bag. "I said, yep, you're here, you're doing something great," Pagnac said. That something includes scouring Pagnac's home, excavating the lawn and cordoning off a block of Hemlock Lane to outside traffic. Neighbors interviewed Sunday by the Pioneer Press said, they suspected something was amiss at the two-story home for years, recounting Pagnac and her husband, Marshall Midden, doing extensive landscaping in the years after the disappearance. On Monday, Pagnac said the vicious rumors are being repeated by neighbors whom they have never gotten along with. But if somebody makes those kind of comments, law enforcement really can't ignore them, she said. She hopes the renewed attention to her daughter's case prompts someone to remember something that could lead to Amy. "That's the best thing that could happen," she said. On the afternoon of August 5, 1989, the teen was on her way home with Midden after a trip to their farm property in Lee County when they stopped at a gas station in Osso. Midden used a bathroom and later told authorities he couldn't find his stepdaughter when he came out. Pagnac said she remembered getting a call from Midden that August evening. He was panicked, she said. The girl wasn't in the women's restroom, wasn't in a clothing shop or bakery nearby, wasn't at the local school playground. He said, "I should have never gone in the bathroom. I should have never used the bathroom," the mother said. In spring 1989, Amy had suffered a seizure and went through bouts of being extremely angry, her mother said Monday. At the time of the disappearance, she had been acting normal for at least a month, she said. Authorities initially thought Amy had run away or had a seizure and wandered off, disoriented. That impression changed the longer she remained missing. Pagnac said the authorities stopped by her house in 2007, with a search warrant and spent less than a day looking through the home. They also went to the farm in Lee County, she said, but doesn't know how long they were there. Law enforcement, including the FBI, Maple Grove Police and Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, knocked again Sunday with a sealed search warrant. Excavation was underway Monday as a heavy rain doused the tents, trailers and police tape that circled the home. Maple Grove Police Captain Keith Turlinden said Sunday that, despite Pagnac's claims, the case was never forgotten by local police. No one has been arrested in connection with Amy's disappearance, and police have declined to say whether her parents are considered suspects. Non-family abductions of children are rare. Authorities estimate only 5% of child abductions are committed by a stranger. A 1999 study by the U.S. Justice Department, which the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children considers the most definitive exploration of the topic, puts that number at 2% or 3%. Tips have come in from across the country, including one alleged sighting in Minneapolis, but have never been confirmed. What does Pagnac think happened to her daughter? "I have no idea where Amy is. I have only my fears," she said. What if she's being trafficked? What if she's being held prisoner in someone's basement? You know it has to be something like that. Also, in the back of your mind, there has been really nothing since 1992. No new leads, no nothing. No even really good possible leads, she said. But she's been a pain in the ass to Maple Grove police, Pagnac said, urging them to keep her daughter's case alive. That included last year, when Pagnac handed over a drawing her daughter had done of a unicorn. It had been hanging in the family home since 1989. She was so happy. "I got her the tape to put it up on her wall," Pagnac said. I told them they could. Just don't destroy it. It's one of the few memories I have left." She said she's been calling for the past year, wondering if the picture has helped at all. And what if this latest search turns up nothing? I'll still be badgering them next week when they leave, she said. Having this be a media circus, if it gets people to come forward and help find Amy, so be it.
9. The Union 76 gas station victim. Many serial killers share similar characteristics. One that stands out is their desire to keep an item from their victims and hold onto it like a trophy. It might be a piece of hair, the victim's driver's license, pictures, intimate apparel, or anything that would help the killer recall the experience. One of the most notorious killers to ever strike in California was computer programmer Randy Kraft, who was responsible for killing 16 young men, and suspected of killing up to 50 plus more. Kraft was also a trophy collector. At the time of his arrest, investigators found over 70 pictures of young men, most who looked unconscious or dead, tucked under the floor mat of his car, under the bare feet of his final victim. More were found inside his home during a police search. They also found a list inside a briefcase in his car trunk, that was separated into 2 columns and had cryptic words listed under each column, 30 in the left column and 31 in the right column. Investigators referred to it as Kraft's scorecard, see enlarged image of the actual scorecard, because they believed it contained references and clues to the identities of his victims. Some of the entries on the list were easy to connect to unsolved murders, including those that matched up with young men found in Kraft's pictures. Other connections were ambiguous and failed to provide enough evidence that would prove the connection in a court of law, although investigators believed the connections to be legitimate. Other entries could never be matched up to any unsolved murders, to the frustration of the investigators who had worked years to solve the puzzles. Below is the scorecard with the cryptic items listed in the order that Kraft had them listed. The more obvious connections include EDM, which matched the initials of Edward Daniel Moore. Other notations matched the location of where the victims' bodies were dumped. For example, Wilmington connected Kraft to the 1973 murder of John Doe 16, whose body was found in Wilmington. What was most disturbing to investigators were the entries like 2 in 1 megavolt to PL, that appeared to represent that there was more than one victim, yet they were unable to connect it to any unsolved murders. What the list did provide were clues to the identity some of Kraft's victims, that could then be matched, or not matched, through forensic testing of evidence found on, and around the victims and in Kraft's home. Eventually, Kraft was convicted of 16 murders, but experts believe he may have killed over 50 additional victims. He's currently on death row. Kraft was nicknamed the Scorecard Killer because he had a coded list with cryptic references to his crimes. The list contained 61 items. While some of them have been matched to his known victims, it's likely that there are also references to unsolved crimes. The 30th item on the list was the number 76. As the crime fits Kraft's profile, this may be a reference to the Union 76 gas station where the dismembered remains of the young man were found in 1979. However, Kraft has never been officially charged with that murder, and the victim's identity is still unknown.
10. The disappearance of Jessica Hirina. Nearly a year after she is believed to have been abducted, the Norton Shores police chief maintains hope that investigators will bring Jessica Hirina home. Thursday, the Norton Shores Police Department released new information about their investigation, including a detailed timeline of the night Hirina vanished. Hirina, 25, was working alone at the ExxonMobil gas station on Sternberg Road in Norton Shores, when she went missing around 11 p.m. on April 26, 2013. I never thought I'd be here a year later discussing this case, Norton Shores Police Chief Daniel Shaw said Thursday. Despite numerous tips, police said they have not received, or discovered the necessary information leading them to Jessica or her abductor. The only leads so far are surveillance photos of a silver minivan and a sketch of the man behind the wheel. Shaw said those remain the strongest leads in the case. In fact, he said, there are only leads in this case. The driver of that van hasn't come forward to identify themselves, and we cannot figure out who was driving the van and why they were at the store at that time, Shaw said. Thursday, police released a detailed timeline and crime scene photos based on the investigation. Chief Shaw told 24-Hour News 8 they released the photos to show there was no struggle on the inside. With that information, police believe Hirina's abductor was someone she knew or she was going out to help somebody that was in need. We withheld some of the information before, because we thought it may be pertinent to the case and also affect the trial in the future, Shaw said. At this time, we felt like it would be important to release that information to the public because there have been a lot of questions as to why a person saw a van and didn't then question or see if Jessica was okay. One of the key witnesses in the investigation was the Exxon gas station manager, who was riding motorcycles with her husband on Sternberg Road and saw a silver minivan slowly pull into the gas station and turn off its highlights, according to a press release from Norton Shores Police. The manager suspected Hirina may be in the process of stealing from Exxon, so she continued to watch with her husband. According to police, the manager's husband stated that he was positive the van was a silver Chrysler Town & Country, as it was the same type a relative owned. Neither the manager nor her husband obtained the license plate, as they had no reason to believe a crime had occurred. The investigation into Hirina's disappearance has involved a large investigative task force, made up of 15 federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies and 14 separate specialized units. A total of 33 search warrants and a minimum of 20 consensual searches have been executed. The searches were primarily conducted to recover cellular, telephone, computer, and social media data. However, there were several searches of residential property for other physical evidence. The investigation included a minimum of 12 ground searches and 2 underwater searches. In all, investigators have devoted over 12,000 staff hours while conducting approximately 1,300 follow-up investigations based on tips and information received. Shaw said officers often get questions about the status of the case. I know it does bother some of our people, Shaw said. The comment that's been made is, every time someone asks me a question like that, I feel like a failure because we haven't solved this case yet. It's just a constant reminder that we are failing in their mind. But the case is still a top priority for the department. This is not a cold case, Shaw said. And despite the fact that police haven't found Hirina or the person who abducted her, Shaw said they know a lot more than we did a year ago. Hirina's family, meanwhile, is frustrated that the investigation seems to have stalled. It's never ending. You're on a roller coaster ride. You think, well, it might be a good tip. We might get someplace. But then no news, Hirina's grandmother Diane Homrick said. Shaw said he hopes the one-year anniversary of the abduction will cause someone who knows something to call police and give them the tip they need to crack the case. I'm hoping that tomorrow or later tonight, I can call you to tell you that we have a suspect in custody. That's what our hope is. And that we found Jessica and we have her home, Shaw said.